Alright, here's the real video for Steamworld Dig 2. You can stop howling about it. Who is that?
Spoiler warning for Steamworld Dig 2. It's longer, it's deep.
Steamworld Dig 2 marks a turning point for me, because it's the first time I've had to play, analyze, and produce a video for a game I ultimately didn't like. Which, by the way, completely blindsided me. I've been slowly working my way through every available game in the Steamworld library, starting with Dig, which was essentially a prototype, then following with Heist, which I found to be utterly delightful in gameplay if lacking in story. Every game in the series meets very positive ratings on Steam, but Dig 2 is the only one to hit overwhelmingly positive. It's so very weird to be in the minority of people who just didn't like it very much. Now, I don't like to talk down games. 1, I'm not as smart as everybody seems to think I am. 2, my tastes in games are not the same as everyone else's. If that were the case, the FIFA series would never have sold a single copy. 3, these games represent someone's livelihood, and I don't want my work being the reason they didn't make a sale. So when it came time to play Dig 2 and I found myself disappointed, I decided to be cheeky and hide it in another video. And I hid it pretty damn well, because statistically speaking, you probably didn't watch it. Now, with view numbers like this, I'm not sure I watched it. In fact, my disappointment and consequent fear over this video caused me to briefly abandon the Steamquest altogether, only picking it up when I got ideas for other quests in the future and didn't want the concept to be founded on failure. So how do we do this? Honestly, I'm not here to trash the game. That's not my art. I will do my best to analyze it properly, give credit where it's due, and explain where I think it falters or fails. So with that, let's look at the most successful and popular game in the Steamworld franchise, Steamworld Dig 2. There are 2 stories in every game. There's the story the game tells you, and there's the story you tell yourself. The narrative of how you got from point A to point B and what that journey meant to you. Dig 2 opened with Dorothy McCrank, a vendor from the first game, on a quest to find her friend Rusty. Rusty was the protagonist of the first game, and he disappeared after destroying the hive mind of the Voltbots, Vectron. I've said before, and will likely say again, that storytelling is just not Thunderful's strong suit. Weird given how excellent their art team is. There was minimal story in Dig 1. Rusty only spoke twice the whole game. But as a player, the character you would have interacted with the most would have been Dorothy, as she was the one you sold your ore to and who had the most to say about your adventure. Is that enough of a bond to justify leaving home on a quest to find him? I think that depends on what your story in Dig was and how much you valued Dorothy's role. She is following a rumor that Rusty was seen heading towards El Machino, a mining town similar to Tumbleton but more active and well populated. On the way, she, like Rusty, falls into the plot. So already we can see that Dig 2 is intended to be a more narratively involved game than its predecessor. Rusty really just dug down and didn't find anyone with any conflicting goals until he hit the very bottom. But in Dig 2, Dorothy is going to interact with at least 3 groups whose actions will influence her journey. The first of which are these cultists who worship old Vectron technology, though that technology is somewhat less respectful of them, and Dorothy, whom it mistakes for more target practice. While Dorothy takes care of her first boss fight, let's talk a little about movement in Dig 2. This game describes itself as a Metroidvania, and we'll get back to that. It does, however, have ability-gated progress, and that means movement. Now, there is one part of the Dig series movement I don't particularly like, and that's the wall climb. Nearly every wall in Dig 2 is climbable, and this is done by jumping while moving towards the wall. Not sure why this rubs me wrong. I have no problem with hugging walls to slide down them, but for some reason this feels kludgy to me. Gameplay in Dig involves a lot of the player creating their own pathways. A solution is needed to prevent them from getting stuck in a hole they can't get out of, but I'm not sure this was the best solution, since it means height is never a true obstacle, though falling certainly is. But otherwise, Dorothy's controls handle well, which means boss fights like this, which require aerial maneuvers and quick repositioning, are perfectly fine and go down without much trouble. Now here's where you can see Thunderful preparing to expand their tiny universe. Meet Fen. Fen is a Vectron sprite, which we will learn a little more about later, but suffice to say they are a rogue splinter AI from Vectron who has become independent. Now that Dorothy has destroyed their totem, they take residence in her furnace in exchange for minimap services and poor life advice. Not long after, the two arrive at their destination. Now in Dig 1, Tumbleton was essentially a dressed up set of vendor tabs. El Machino it's basically the same. It's got a bit more personality. There's an ongoing drama where the mayor is ignoring the global earthquake problem even though the scientists are warning of imminent global catastrophe, yada yada yada. Everyone else, pretty one note though. And this is, I'm sorry, it's a major failing. Even in Heist, which I remind you came out 2 years prior to Dig 2, the characters had bits of banter on the completion of missions. I'm not asking for Hades-level homecoming dialogue, but just a bit of added dimension would do wonders for relating to these characters. Why can't we get a mission from the mayor, or something from Ma Yonker, or a quest from the small-town bot who thinks she's in the big city now? Even when we do reach a milestone, the dialogue is mostly the same. Mayor Yonker is always more worried about the town's economy than its existence. Dr. Sherman can't pinpoint the source of the earthquakes but knows they're getting worse. Barnacle Jones has business tips. Minimal change means minimal development. None of these characters has much of a history, they have almost no connection to the mine or the events of the game, and aside from Fen, who gradually gives up trying to lure Dorothy into an untimely end, none of these characters develop. Which is why I still can't remember the name of Small Town Bot and don't care if I ever do. We do get to expand our understanding of Steambot mechanobiology at least. We already knew that Steambot parents donate parts to create their children, but Ma Yonker raises an interesting scenario. Ma here is all bits, pieces, and sparking wires. Now this wasn't a mining accident. She gave up like 60% of her body to build her sons. Ma is a single mother to 4 boys, none of whom was worth it in her opinion. Dysfunctional families aside, it interests me that her parts haven't been replaced, and neither had Seabrass's parts from Heist, though he had what amounted to non-robotic prostheses. If parts used in child rearing can't be replaced, it makes propagating their species one hell of a sacrifice. Also, Steambots use the bathroom, but no details were forthcoming save that it smells. But as to Dorothy's quest, she's in luck. Rusty did indeed pass through El Machino and into their mine. But he never came back up. So after proving to the mayor that she can A. survive the rigors of the mine and B. bring back valuable ore to sell, Dorothy descends to find her friend. Anyone else find it odd how many games about digging there are nowadays? Dome Keeper, Wall World, a game about digging a hole, a game about digging a lot of holes, Deep Rock Galactic. Clearly there's something to this. I get it, though I can't quite pinpoint why I get it. There's just something very satisfying about punching your way through dirt in search of riches, amplified by the observable mark you leave in your wake. It's destructive, but there's no denying your impact on the world. The loop of the dig games is as follows. Descend into the mine, dig out minerals while handling aggressive wildlife, return to El Machino to cash in your finds, then use the money to improve Dorothy's gear. Everything surrounds this loop, and it is no less compelling in Dig 2 than Dig 1. Now, Dig 2 sells itself as a Metroidvania, and one of the hallmarks of this genre is ability-gated progression. You can't just give the player a double jump, they need to get that later in the game so that they can get over Mount Kenya double jump. Fine as is, but when you're making a sequel to a Metroidvania, you have 2 problems. First, how do you explain why the main character in Game 2 can't do what they could in Game 1? Obviously, Dig 2 sidesteps this by changing characters. Dorothy never received the Voltbot upgrades, so she doesn't have Rusty's abilities. The second, though, is how to make upgrades interesting when the player has seen them all before. Here is where Thunderful's talent for game design really shines. Instead of rehashing Rusty's upgrades or modifying them slightly, Thunderful's development team committed themselves to examining Dorothy's mobility needs and crafting all new abilities to achieve them. So she never gets Rusty's double jump or his rocket fist, no. She gets an all-new suite of tools. She gets sticky bombs, she gets a jackhammer, she gets a grappling hook, possibly the only mobility tool more beloved than double jumps, and it's non-contextual so you can use it anywhere. Despite being exploration platformer characters from the same series, Dorothy completely stands on her own. Full credit to Thunderful for doing this, it was 100% the right move. To pile on further praise, their version of a charm system is remarkably fun to play with. Your money goes towards upgrading your gear. Each time you upgrade that gear, you unlock a cog upgrade for it. Cog upgrades are optional modifications for your tools powered by the cogs you find in secret or puzzle areas of the game. Cogs are a fun addition, if not exactly game-changing. They don't have to be though, as the movement is fine on its own. But about the gameplay loop, there is kind of a problem here. Dig 2's gameplay gives a sense of almost immersive sim-level systemics. Enemies can hurt other enemies, rocks can fall when undermined, insta-killing bugs or Dorothy if she's not careful. Moments when that happens are delightful, but rare. For the most part, I've found engaging with enemies repetitive. Slower moving enemies I'd maneuver around to whack with my pickaxe. Faster, more deadly ones I'd bomb from a distance or try to avoid completely. And that worked for, well, everything. Aside from the 3 boss battles, there isn't a lot of variety in how you approach combat. Dorothy isn't all that maneuverable in close quarters, and some enemies are very hard to shake or divert, so sometimes I would just tank hits while swinging my axe until they died. And that seemed like the most efficient way to go about it. Combat's not the fun part of Dig 2. The other problem is more central. Dig 2 is a really linear game, and it borrows in bad ways from its predecessor. See, in theory you have a wide open mine to dig through. In practice, you're in a funnel. You might pick the left lane or the right, you'll occasionally switch it up to engage with or avoid obstacles, but the game lacks a sense of true exploration. Instead of digging for secrets buried, you're digging along a set of rails from one set piece to the next. Fine if that's what you want, but I was expecting a more self-determined route. Mainly because that was a problem in Dig 1 as well. It presents an odd paradox. Many of the mining games out there are about exploration, or efficiency, or optimization, or discovery. The Dig series feels more like a set of linear levels just set vertically, except that there are some which are horizontal. Which, you know what, let's get to the story for a minute. If you've been watching this series or just played the games, you know humanity has a subordinate role in the Steamworld. Time was not kind to us, and we have devolved into radioactive moonshiners who range between reckless and deranged. Yet, like the cockroaches of lore, we always seem to survive in some capacity. Relations between the Steambots and the Shiners is hostile. They do not like each other and they attack one another mostly on sight. There was some kind of war between the two, long enough ago that Ma Yonker was a child, but she remembers it as the bad times. Never trust a Shiner is Ma Yonker's wisdom, and she'll pass it to you for free. So it's a surprise for Dorothy when she finds a secret enclave of Shiners, one of whom appears to be sound of mind and body. While initially suspicious of one another, the Shiner named Rosie invites Dorothy in and spills some rather bitter tea. Rusty had come through their area before, and according to her, he's the one responsible for the ever-increasing earthquakes. Dorothy doesn't believe it at first, so Rosie tells her to see for herself, giving her the grappling hook in the process. She's directed to the Cult of the Destroyer's temple, where the evidence is really hard to dismiss. I've said it before, I will say it again, Thunderful knows how to f***ing draw. This lava stage is absolutely fantastic, masterclass in aesthetic design, even if it makes no sense for cultists to have buried their own temple. I guess the explanation is that they're insane, so why not? After defeating the high priest of the cult, whose name is canonically Ronald, Dorothy finds and destroys Rusty's doomsday device. There's no sign of Rusty himself, but at least the quakes should calm down. Being the last person to see him alive, Dorothy asks Rosie for advice. There they discuss what might have happened to him at the end of Steamworld Dig. Now Rusty destroyed Vectron, but the entire game had been spent with Rusty being slowly transformed into a Voltbot, his heart being the final piece to the puzzle. Wait, if Vectron needed Rusty's heart to be complete, why is Vectron an independent enemy in Heist? When he struck the final blow, Rusty raised his fist in an electric aura, just like he does every time he gets another Voltbot upgrade, suggesting one last alteration had occurred. This fits with the trailers for Dig 2, which show Rusty's eyes glowing an electric blue as he works on the Doomsday device. It also fits with Fenn's fears of Vectron, how it takes who you are and changes you into someone else. Fenn won't go back there. But if there's a chance Rusty is still down there, they will get Dorothy in. But while she's in there, she won't have her map and she won't have a way out. And Fen's only advice to her if she sees something moving is to run. Let me pause for a moment. I won't have a ton of positive things to say after this point. Dig 2 really fell off for me after the Vectron sequence. We're going to go into it, and my thoughts on where Thunderful may have gone wrong. But before we do that, I want to express how incredibly impressive this next part was. Dorothy is dropped into a world of darkness and dust. Vectron is deep, unknowably deep. So much so that the Shiners have barely even touched this area. And yet, the size of it. The parallax artwork, foreground and background, is a staple of Thunderful's art style, and it's put to such incredibly good use here. Surrounding Dorothy is the wreckage of Vectron's operations. Twisted metal, mangled wire, floating Vectron sprites with none of Fen's thoughts or humor, just an instinctive drive to hurt anything that gets close to them. And in the back, mile after mile of gargantuan Voltbots, an army of steel and wires rendered inert by the destruction of its master. At first, there's no music in this spot, lending it an eerie silence. The dirt is so thin it collapses beneath Dorothy's feet. The wreckage of a war that never happened lies buried under the dust of an abruptly halted complex. Yet something is still stirring in these caves. If Dorothy gets too close to one of the sprites, it might inhabit one of the buried golems. And if it does... Don't feel bad if you got a bit of panic when the alarm's triggered. These golems are way faster than you, so you don't just have to run, you have to run early. If you can avoid them long enough, they will go inert again. But there's no way to avoid them completely, and soon Dorothy is cornered with no choice but to run as the golems close in on her. It's not certain what happened here. The code Blue Savior from the static hints at something. Was it an automated response by Fen? Or did something more sinister happen? Did what's left of Vectron capture her? Did it change her and let her go? Is Dorothy going to become something else? Something just as bad? No, there's no evidence at all that Dorothy and the Red Queen were the same person. The Queen clearly had no idea who Vectron was, and Fen mentions nothing about it if they're brought into the fight. It is unclear how Dorothy got out, and whether she may have paid a price for her intrusion. Still, this is a big change in tone. In Dig 1, Vectron was presented as a powerful force in the making. In Heist, it was a mastermind supervillain. But this is the first time Vectron seemed genuinely scary. The first time I thought to myself, this thing cannot get loose. Which of course it does. Fen, though, managed to pick up some data while he was wired into the system. The reason the quakes haven't stopped is because Rusty didn't build one doomsday device, he built 4. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, right? Each device is hidden in previous areas of the game. Dorothy couldn't reach them before, but with her new movement abilities, they're fair game. This is where Dig 2 claims its Metroidvania cred. Ability-gated progression, backtracking, it ticks the boxes. But be real, it does not have the feel. We aren't exploring areas we had to leave behind, we are directed back. There weren't ominous mysteries nagging at our memories, just a spot on the map we hadn't filled out yet. And it's tedious. I'm all for finding and exploring new places and old areas. I love the feel of discovery. This isn't it. It's more like each zone has a harder section with more dangerous and aggressive hazards, but you've also got top tier upgrades by this point, so it can actually be easier than the early parts. And for all Thunderful's skill at art design, they don't use it to tell much story. What is there is pointed out by Fen. In fact, this whole section of the game is so dry of story content that I was thrilled just to meet this little charmer in his 10 seconds of semi-meaningful babble. And goddamn, but when we finish this and get the story's twist, it's so dumb and so abrupt I can't help wondering whether they ran out of time, money, or ideas first. If you saw the old video, you know that, as it turns out, Rosie is actually the one responsible for the earthquakes. She's been building a massive Vectron-powered still that will provide her family with as much moon juice as they can drink. so they won't ever want to go back out into the dangerous mines again. Rusty is her prisoner and battery. The Doomsday devices were actually draining power from her still, since it's made from unstable Vectron tech and will destroy the world. And I'm not saying Rosie couldn't be the twist villain of the story, but I am saying this was the worst of the possible options. Humanity has been a joke in the Steamworld franchise. That's fine. We're pretty dumb and about 60% likely to ruin our entire species before we land a person on Mars. I am fine with us as a cautionary tale. What I'm not fine with is the waste in potential. In terms of the Steamworld narrative, Rosie is a goddamned miracle. A human who, despite incredible cultural pressure to do so, never partook of the moon juice. She developed normally, she has intelligence, she has emotional stability. The game never even bothers to interrogate her side of this conflict. Steambots live fairly stable lives. Rosie was born into poverty, disease, and super alcoholism. Her entire race cowers underground from robots that kill her people on sight. Yet somehow she grew up stronger and smarter than any of them. And damn, they don't even respect her for it. The other Shiners all think she's the dumb one. She doesn't have any friends and her family only listens to her because she provides them with moon juice. She's got valid reasons to be angry about her situation and even to be angry at the Steambots. And none of this is really foreshadowed, you know. The only people who report on Rusty's condition are the El Machino citizens, who only know that he disappeared down the mines, and the cult of the Destroyer, who say he showed up one day to build a Doomsday device and then disappeared mysteriously. At first, I thought this artifact, a red scarf, was supposed to be a sign of his abduction, but it turns out he's wearing his while strapped into Rosie's battery. By the way, I think this marks the 4th time in the entire series Rusty speaks. So we know that Rusty built the devices. We know that the cult firmly believed they were Doomsday devices. We know the earthquakes were slowly getting worse before we arrived. So if the machines were draining power, they weren't doing a great job, were they? Also, why is it Dr. Sherman's instruments couldn't detect the source of the quakes? The quakes were still only coming from one device, not from Rusty's machines. This whole mess just reeks of an abrupt redraft. I am very sure the writers were planning to go in a different direction or just a longer direction, and for some reason had to change lanes. It still astounds me that even with 2 separate playthroughs and footage taken for the video, I have less time played in Dig 2 than in Heist. There were so many ways they could have taken this story. And forgive me if old woman who tells you not to trust the group of people she doesn't like turns out to be right all along is not the one I favored. But let's put my problems with Dig 2 to bed. Because there is something I overlooked my first time playing it, and maybe Thunderful did too. This game really shouldn't be a Metroidvania. I don't know if they pursued that angle for its popularity or recognizability, but the Dig series does not need it. As a Metroidvania, this game is severely lacking in the luster department, and I am so sorry it released in Hollow Knight's shadow that year. But there is good, solid gameplay here. Specifically, here, in these caves. You'll encounter them throughout your digging, and each one has a puzzle challenge which, on success, rewards the player with an upgrade cog. That's one thing, but each chamber also has a secondary objective to reach, a hidden pathway that requires using the same tools in a different way. These typically reward the player with an artifact, usually a relic of the human world before it fell, but sometimes one that lightly expands on the lore of the Steamworld. The Steamworld Dig series does not need to be a Metroidvania because it's already a unique and high-quality puzzle platformer. In fact, the design of the Temple of the Destroyer with its mandatory conveyor sections and hidden secrets makes me think it was where this game was always destined to go. They just need to lean into it harder. Like, take this puzzle room. It's a race against time to get to the end while lava rises up beneath you. And then there's another trick to find the hidden relic. Or take this room, where the room will fill with arrows and you have to make sure you're clinging to the right side of the rock to avoid them. Dig 2, and really Dig 1 as well, already have the fundamentals nailed down. They just need to adjust their angle. We'll keep the digging aspect, that's important, it's unique and iconic to the franchise, but focus much more on uncovering the puzzle sections and build the game and narrative, seriously build some better narrative already, around these puzzles. If an underground goose chase is to be the way of things, then let it be so without apology. Tell the story in the mines. Maybe have our new main character, because I assume you'll change it again, be a rescue bot. or maybe rebuilding connections between isolated enclaves, something to give more purpose to the mining. That is what I would like to see for Dig 3, and I believe they could do it, assuming after the Atari acquisition that they're able to remain who they were. I know it's better than disappearing entirely, but you hate to see it happen. Well, that's Steamworld Dig 2, and that finishes the third leg of the Steamquest. Next up, Thunderful pivots to a fourth genre, and one I am not known for my regular enjoyment of. Till next time, thanks for playing. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation, aren't you? Help?